All right, my estheticians, today we're going to talk about infection control and why it's important in your everyday practice. You are constantly up against microorganisms that are trying to infect your client's face or whatever body part you are working on that day. At the same time, you're trying to clear your client's face from an infection in itself. So we need to know what we are up against, what type of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. But in order to understand this, we need to step back and talk about what regulatory agencies are in place to help us and make sure that we are giving our clients the best and safest treatments possible. Let's start off with the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, aka OSHA, that was established in 1970. This regulatory administration is in charge of guidelines for handling, mixing, storing, and dispensing of products. Basically, they're setting up a general safety in the workplace. This was established in the 1970s, and they came up with something called the Material Safety Data Sheet, which is required for you to have in your practice or in your spa so that you can make sure that you are using all the chemicals available in the most safest and efficient way possible. Now, there are different types of laws and statutes. Okay, there are also rules and regulatory agencies. Laws and statutes are established by the federal and state levels. These are going to be establishing what the scope of practice of an esthetician is. Rules and regulatory agencies are going to be places like your state board that will enforce how the law should be implemented in your specific area of work and in your specific state. So these rules and regulations can be different depending on which state you live in. So you have to be up to date because these rules and regs change constantly. Now that all that administrative stuff is out of the way, let's talk about what is infection control. Infection control is your ability to clean and disinfect your workplace so that you do not cross-contaminate or spread the infection to your clients, and by that to other clients that you will be seeing in the day. When you clean something, it's a mechanical process. We're using soap and water, and we're using mechanical debridement to help clean the equipment that you have been using. Disinfection will destroy most organisms. However, it does not take care of spores, and we will talk a little bit more about that. In order to understand which microorganisms you are up against, let's first talk about bacteria. Bacteria can be broken down into non-pathogenic and pathogenic. Non-pathogenic clearly just means that they're harmless. They're basically found in your body, like in your GI flora, that help you digest food. And they actually help you break down food. Now, there are other types of bacteria called pathogenic bacteria. Pathogenic bacteria are harmful, so it makes sense for us to talk more about pathogenic bacteria. Bacteria can be further broken down into something called Cocci, Bacilli, and Spirilla. Cocci bacteria are going to be round, single, or they can be in groups, or they can be in groups. Cocci are roughly 30% of the bacteria that you will encounter. Therefore, you need to be mindful of what these types of bacteria can cause in your client, or what type of infection they can cause in your client. Cocci can be broken down into Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, and Diplococcus. This will be on your exam, and overall in life, you should know a little bit about these. Now, Staphylococci, if you looked at this under a microscope, you would see that these bacteria clump together like a grape. They cause pus, they cause pustules and abscesses. Next is going to be Streptococci. If you looked at this under a microscope, you would see that they line together in a long line. They're a string of beads, essentially. They also cause pus. They can also cause strep throat. Diplococci are another type of subcategory of cocci, which look like pairs of grapes under a microscope. They are known to cause pneumonia. They can only be transported via air, dust, or mucus. All right, next. The next category of bacteria are going to be bacilli. These are rod-shaped under a microscope. They can cause tetanus, TB, and diphtheria. Third one is going to be spirilla. Spirilla have little flagella, which are basically these tails that can cause or allow these bacteria to move through a medium. They can cause syphilis and Lyme disease. Therefore, these types of bacteria can be transported via intercourse, through vaginal discharge, through mucal discharge, all of that. So that's why we need to be very cognizant about these types of bacteria and how they can spread. Now, next, let's talk about bacterial growth. What is the life cycle of a bacteria? There's going to be an active state and an inactive state. Bacteria love warm, dark, damp, and dirty areas. This is where they grow and they divide. They divide from one cell into another cell by something called a binary fission. This is how bacteria can divide, replicate, grow, and create their colonies. The inactive states are going to be the unfavorable environments, such as the opposite of the active, which is going to be a very light area, a cool area. They don't like clean areas, and they don't like very dry areas. Now, the inactive stage of a bacteria is going to be a state where the bacteria is essentially hibernating just like a bear. Hibernation, in order for the bacteria to hibernate, they need to have a protective layer. And this protective layer we call a spore. The spore is basically this waxy area around the cell of the bacteria that allows it to be protected from these unfavorable environments that they're in. All right. Now, why do bacteria need to create these spores? They need to create it because they need to be resistant to the unfavorable environments that they can potentially live in. They don't want to die. They want to protect themselves. And that's why they become resistant to these environments. Once they become resistant, they can start becoming more dangerous. For example, when a bacteria becomes resistant, such as something called a methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, it can then start to endure very unfavorable environments and start to infect people that are not, whose immune systems are not very strong. That is why you need to know what your client's medical background is, just to have an idea and to know how susceptible they're going to be to an infection. All right, very good. That was a brief overview of bacteria in the world of an esthetician. Estheticians really need to know bacteria so that they can help prevent spread of infection from their clients to another client. That's called cross-contamination. Estheticians are responsible for the safety of their clients. Therefore, having some knowledge about bacteria and how you can prevent it in your workplace is super important. Follow along for more tidbits on how you can be the best professional in your industry.